Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. We're still waiting for a few more people to come in. I hope I am audible enough. Okay. Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to yet another exciting Golden Keys 3-day leadership workshop. My name is Koketso, and I'm from Mafikeng Golden Key 2020-21 chapter, and I'll be your host for today's session. This session will be about emotional intelligence. But before we start, I'm gonna talk you through some house rules. Please use the chat box for telling us your name and where you're from, and use the Q&A function for questions, which will be answered after the session. Ladies and gentlemen, buckle up. This will be an emotional ride, no pun intended. Today we have an emotional intelligence facilitator. His name is Tsuro. Let me first explain the session. Leaders set the tone of their organization. If they lack emotional intelligence, it could have far more reaching consequences. Emotional intelligence is widely known to be a key component of effective leadership. The ability to be perceptively in tune with yourself and your emotion, as well as having a sound situational awareness, can be a powerful tool for leading a team. The act of knowing, understanding, and responding to emotion, overcoming stress in the moment, and being aware of how your words and action affect others is described as emotional intelligence. In this session, we'll break down the emotional quotient and its importance in effective leadership. I'm going to read out the bio of our guest speaker. He's one of the 2020's 50 under 30 emerging leaders and 2018's top 10 young global future leaders recognized by the HR's.com Leadership Excellence Awards. Described by many colleagues as an enthusiastic entrepreneur and pace-setting leader who thrives in performance and excellence. In addition to corporate training, he is the chief executive of the eHub, an entrepreneurs hub that helps professionals transition from corporate to entrepreneurship with mentorship in order to alleviate the plight of the African. His work credits include mentoring, communication, and leadership development programs at Mercedes-Benz SA, MultiChoice, FSCA, and various other organizations. Above this, he has done extensive training at corporates across Southern Africa, such as Mercedes-Benz South Africa, Standard Bank in Malawi, South Africa, and Zambia, Exaro, University of Witwatersrand, Afrox Linde, Bidvest Bank, and many other in different industries. He is a firm believer in the mantra, excuses or results. He believes in Napoleon Hill's statement that whatever the mind conceives and believes, the mind can achieve. This is evident by his numerous achievements, from being the Southern Africa Hall of Fame Bright Spark Award winner for innovation, Golden Goose Award for team leadership, to mention only but a few. He was recognized twice with the Distinguished Toastmaster Award for Excellence in Communication and Leadership, the highest accolade bestowed by Toastmasters International as Program Quality Director-elect for Toastmasters across 12 Southern African countries. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Andrew Tsuro. Over to you, Andrew.
Today we are celebrating Africa Day. But what are we really celebrating at this point in time if our continent is in a drought of leaders? I notice we've got a number of colleagues that are joining us from Cape Town. And for those that have never been to Cape Town, you would agree and learn that Cape Town is a city covered in 2 oceans. And a couple of years ago, Cape Town was experiencing a drought of water. Isn't it ironic to you that a city covered in 2 oceans was experiencing a drought of water? I put it to you that today, as we celebrate our Africa Day, our continent is experiencing a drought. A drought not because we do not have people, but just like Cape Town, the right quality of water the Cape Townians needed was limited and scarce. The right quality. And our continent today, the right quality of leaders our continent needs is limited and scarce. As a result of that, I hope today you and I will take on this mission to start alleviating our continent of this drought by stepping forward to becoming better leaders, and especially in this day and age, leading with emotional intelligence. But for us to lead with emotional intelligence, the first thing that we may need to start looking at is essentially, how does one lead with emotional intelligence? Now, here's the basic statement to look into. Anyone can become angry. That is easy. But for you to be angry with the right person, to the right degree, at the right time, for the right purpose, in the right way, that is not easy. And you know this from your experience. And so maybe the question I want to ask you, and please put this on the chat box as fast as you can. How do you feel? If you're to look at the 6 emotions that I'm going to put down, pick one. How are you feeling right now? How are you feeling right now? Let's see from the chat box. How are you feeling? Happy, 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 happy. Everybody seems happy. And then there's Chanel, surprised. Hey, I don't know where joy is coming from, Lenso, but happy is what I'm looking for. Surprised, yeah, that's more like it. Scared, Aubriel, yeah, that's an emotion. But if I were to ask you a little bit, to dig a little bit deeper, how do you really feel? Tap in a little bit deeper. How do you really feel? If you're to look at that circle or wheel of emotions, how do you really feel? How do you really feel? Anxious, tired, amazed, hopeful, interested, anxious, optimistic, powerful, interested, proud. African leaders, self-awareness is the beginning of all wisdom. Self-awareness is the beginning of all wisdom. And where does it start? It starts with you being able to tap in and check in with yourself so that you are able to identify how you're feeling. Many of us are in conflict with the world, with the continent, with our communities, because we ourselves are in conflict with ourselves. We don't know where we are. And so when we look into talking about what emotional intelligence is, when we look into talking about what really emotional intelligence is, it is your ability to recognize and understand emotions in yourself and others. And secondly, to use this awareness to manage your relationships, both personal and professional relationships. How do you behave when you're happy? How do you behave when you're sad? How do you behave when you're scared? How do you behave when you're feeling fearful or disgusted? or surprised for that matter. Leadership is a tool that we need to be able to practice on a daily basis the art of engaging with one another, influencing one another. And if we use the tool of emotional intelligence, by the way, one of the top 7 skills required globally for anyone to be a success in any profession. And so today our conversation is about this drought that we have in our continent that requires emotional intelligence, our ability to connect and relate with people, so much so that we are in tune with our own emotions, but we also are able to see and recognize other people's emotions. My mother always used to love reminding me that charity begins at home. And in your case, home is you. If you are unable to identify and recognize your own emotions, how will you be able to identify and recognize emotions in the people that you're leading, in the people that you're serving? On a daily basis today, we complain, cry, and mourn about leaders who are self-serving, leaders who are careless, leaders who do not look out for the people who elected them into these leadership roles. And we find what could be wrong. Is it because they are corrupt? Is it because they are careless? They don't know? Is it because they're uneducated? No, it's because they lack the skill of emotional intelligence, understanding how to relate with people so that they too can achieve what they want to achieve. Zig Ziglar, a famous author and business leader or expert, always reminded us that if you help enough people achieve what they want to achieve, you too will achieve what you want to achieve. If you help enough people achieve what they want to achieve, you too will also achieve what you want to achieve. And what does this entail? It entails that when you help other people, you gain influence because they see that you're there with them. And what is leadership? Another great author, business expert, John Maxwell, reminds us that leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. Leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. What do we call influence in our everyday life? On the streets, influence is that term that we hate using, manipulation. So when we talk of influence in the professional setting, we're talking about how do we get people to move from point A to point B, to adopt a proposal A and leave proposal B. And in your case, how do you use emotional intelligence to understand what's happening? And what is the lack of emotional intelligence that we see? We see people fighting with each other and not fighting the problem. As team members, as leaders, are we fighting the problem or are we fighting each other? Because if we are fighting each other, then we are degrading ourselves and we are continuously contributing to that which we are criticizing our leaders for. And I want to challenge you in this very morning that sometimes as we engage in our conversation, we need to be looking at how emotionally intelligent we are as individuals. And it starts with self-awareness. And so this afternoon, I'm going to take you through a small, quick exercise and activity to help you build the self-awareness, because we want the leaders with wisdom. And self-awareness being the foundation of any leadership with EQ, then let's look into where do you find your self-awareness. It's the idea of you being able to perceive your emotions at the moment, as well as understand your tendencies across situations when bad. Do you know how you react when you're happy? Some of us we only become kind when we've had 1 or 2 drinks with a percentage. After 1 or 2 drinks with a percentage, do we become kind? Do we become polite? Most of the times, that's not you. People must know that you're stone cold, you're macho, you're a leader. Really? Is this how we really define leadership in our day and age today? Today, I want to challenge you to revisit your definition of leadership, your idea of leadership, and try and see it from the point of connecting one soul to another, one human to another. Because why? People are gregarious beings. People are emotional beings. And what that means is we affect one another by our activities. Whether you inspire or you do the opposite, whether you motivate or you do the opposite, we still affect one another. And hence we can't live in isolation. We lead people, we work with people. And so when we talk of leadership with EQ, it's simply about how are you making this contagious emotion that you've got land on someone else. Ask yourself a few questions. What am I feeling? Why am I feeling it? And once you start asking those questions, think about how will people feel when you enter a certain room that they are a part of. When they walk into a room, when you walk into a room, do people feel excited that, yes, he or she is here? Or, oh, it's about to get down. How do people feel when you get into a space, into an audience? And your ability to be in tune, to be attuned to that, is your ability to lead with emotional intelligence. Speaking of which, let's reflect on our behaviors and know our triggers. What triggers you? What are your pet peeves? Let's put our pet peeves on the chat. For me, it's someone who says K when responding to me. What are your pet peeves? People who lie, unethical people. What are your pet peeves? Because before we look into what it is that we do, we need to be able to identify what your pet peeves are. What is it that you see happening and it gets you really agitated? In many cases, we need to be able to identify those in order to be able to know what we need to work on. I see some of the comments are coming. I'm really interested to see more pet peeves of yours that come through. What is it that frustrates you? What is it that's taking away, that draws your energy out and frustrates the people around you? As you can read on the chat, as you learn from other people, try and identify how many of those elements speak to what you do and you think people are not watching. As leaders, we are being called to be attuned and to be aware of how we ourselves behave and how it affects people. I see elements to do with integrity. I see elements to do with lack of excellence. I see elements to do with time management, inconsistency, lies, disrespect, dishonesty. Are you a culprit? Are you guilty of triggering other people to react? And to you who's got all these pet peeves, are you not being unfair to people who grow up and thinking and being cultured in their homes that it's okay to do what they're doing? Earlier, I was having a chat with someone and I shared with them that, do you recognize that other people in other homes, from the age of 5 or 6, it used to be chuckling when their son used to swear. And the people around that would be like, wow, cool. And then they would chuckle about it. At 16 or 15 or at 14, it used to be okay when their son or daughter would have a tot of cherry or sherry, as you would call it. And now, after 20 years of experience in working with them and being in the same environment, you want to change them? Who do you think you are? What makes your identity? If I were to invite you to be a part of a panel of interviewers, one from church, if you're a religious person, one from your sporting field, if you're a sporting person, one from your evening activities, your extracurricular activities, that could be clubbing, that could be club hopping, anything along those lines. If I were to invite someone from there and invite someone from your work, invite someone from your school, and we put them together and you had to answer one question, tell me about yourself. Where would your identity lie in? Where would your identity lie in? Could that be in your beliefs, in your history, in your titles, in your traits, in your character, in your personality, in your language, in your behavior, in your record, in your stories, in your image? Where would your heritage, your identity be formed by? I shared with you earlier that I'm going to take you through 4 elements that will help you build an identity today. And that's all that I want you to take away from this. If you can forget everything I said, remember that if you're going to lead with emotional intelligence, wisdom starts with knowing yourself. And what is knowing yourself? It's knowing that you've got 4 identities that make you you. The first one is your remembered identity. If you were to look into your rear view mirror of your life, if you were to look into the events that happened in your life in the past, what of those events helped you form a sense of self? I'm reminded, whenever I look into my life, I'm reminded that I'm a facilitator today because part of me, when I was a young kid in grade 1 or grade 2, my parents bought me a chalkboard. In fact, I cried for them to buy me a chalkboard, and I had rocks stationed at the backyard, and I had a whip that my grade 1 teacher used to use. So every time at the end of school, I would be the one, I wouldn't call it stealing, but I would be the one taking my teacher's whip and then taking it, putting it in my satchel, getting home, and then imitating how exactly my teacher would teach and beating up those rocks whenever they didn't get the answer correct. Don't ask me how we communicated. We understood each other. After all, some of you communicate with flowers. What's wrong with me? And so when I look at my remembered identity, today I recognize myself as a facilitator, but it's not something new. It's something that I was able to do and get started with at an earlier stage. What about you? What events in your past have helped you form a sense of self? For some of you, you consider yourself a survivor today because in your past, things were horrific, things were challenging, but you were able to build. The second one, your reflected identity. Again, this one, unfortunately, is not you looking into your rearview mirror. It's people putting that picture in front of your face and saying, hey, you, do you remember this? And your reflected identity are other people remembering events in your past and reminding you of them. What do people remember most about your past? Speaking to the same theme, a few weeks ago, a colleague of mine commented on one of my social media posts and said to me, Andrew, are you still as smart as you were in primary school? Do you remember when all of us would be detained for break time to do our mathematics corrections, and you would be the only one going out to have break and lunch, and then you'd feel sorry for us and come back and teach us what we didn't get? And he's one of many of my colleagues or my high school friends who I would look into. I might not be great at maths nowadays or today, but one thing for sure is I am quite good in class when it comes to teaching. I enjoy it. And I used to then enjoy it then. And so the picture that they always bring in my face is, are you still good in math? Perhaps that's not necessarily the picture that you have. Perhaps your picture is not as great. People remember the mistake that you did a long time ago, and you identify yourself with it today. Don't shun it. Own it. And let's learn what the lesson was behind that reflected identity. What do people remember most about your past? What's the perception that people from your past have of you that they never erase? Your understanding of it will help you know how you influence them, which is what leadership is all about. The programmed identity. Many of us here are parents. Many of us are engaging in relationships that we always instilling and installing a software and the people around us? What software have people installed in you? This is the result of other people sending messages about who you are and who you will become in future. Now, I don't necessarily have a positive example of this, except that of my mother, who always reminds me that I'm going to be a terrible husband. I'm going to be a bad husband. Why? Because I don't usually report that I'm now going away for work, or I'm traveling for holiday, or a weekend away. It's a spontaneous thought. And apparently, the other gender that I'm going to be married to does not appreciate that. So every time I think of marriage, I think of how I'm going to be a terrible husband, thanks to my dear mother, who always reminds me of this. If it's not because I don't report my whereabouts, it's because I'm very choosy with the food that I eat. And so I'm going to be a burden to my wife. Now that's my programmed identity. Every time I think of marriage, I think of I'm going to be a terrible husband or a bad husband simply because of these two elements. But why is this important for me to know and listen to? So that when I get that feedback, when I get what I'm not doing right, I can be able to work on it. I can be able to put in effort in it. And I think that will make me a better person by the time I get married. So yeah, Mom, I'm waiting to prove you wrong. And speaking of proving her wrong, that essentially brings me to my created identity. What's my created identity? The created identity is something similar to what you'd consider a vision board. Now, many of us as leaders, we are challenged to have a vision. What's your vision of this continent? Maybe the continent is a bigger scale, but I wouldn't want you to stoop so low to think you can't make an impact in the continent. Maybe let's start at home. What's the vision for yourself? Let's that charity start at home. What's your vision as a leader of you? How are you going to lead yourself to what platform? Now, I'm grateful to an organization you may know of called Toastmasters. Toastmasters is where leaders are made, and it has helped me develop the kind of leader that I never thought I would. When I was in school, it was seen as a school program, just a club or a society in school. Until I experienced it and realized that even gray-haired men and women were finding their passion, their purpose through Toastmasters, building relationships that were supportive to their purpose and mission, their growth and their ability to grow their initiatives. Today, I challenge each one of you to go on that practical journey to grow your own leadership skills. It could be time management. It could be motivating others. It could be mentoring. It could be giving feedback that is constructive and productive. It could be helping other people become the better versions of themselves. And your created identity is the only identity you have full control over, because it helps you and become better in the people in the circles around you. And so as we engage in this conversation, all too often, I always ask people, at the end of the day, how do you do this? It's recognizing that, number one, it's about your intrapersonal skills. What do you visualize on a regular basis? Or do you not even have time for it because it's not important? It's not a priority. And yet you expect someone's son or someone's daughter to make you a priority. What we expect of others, we need to put it to others. And it creates a certain ripple effect. And so when we talk about leadership in our communities, in our continent, in our country, we are talking about our ability to visualize the good, the bright lights, the tomorrow that we want to see, and eventually being able to build those positive affirmations, something that we take lightly off. And yet we go around telling people words are power. Can you live by that? Can you live by the notion that words are power? Instead of telling me, show me. Because when you show me, I'll remember more than just what you told me. Let's recognize negativity. Have you normalized every time around you seeing the black dot on a white page instead of seeing the white opportunity or the white page that is full of opportunities, full of purity, full of opulence, while we simply focused on just recognizing the negativity? They say what gets recognized gets repeated, so recognize your negativity and let's see it getting repeated in your life. And bear in mind, that doesn't just affect you, it affects the people that are around you. Because guess what? As we said earlier, humans are gregarious. Humans are emotional beings. Humans affect each other. Remember positive decision making. And the first step to getting where you want to be is to decide not to be where you are right now. The first step to getting where you want to be is making a positive decision to not be where you are right now. Right now, right here, do you know where you want to be? And if you do, then decide not to be where you are right now and start moving. And if you are able to do that, then you will be able to cultivate empathy. Empathy, putting yourself in other people's shoes and making it work. And so in this case, for all those things that you say they will trigger you to react in an organization, I did this research and they told me that these are some of the things that trigger people to react. I want you to stop and step back and start recognizing what are some of the things that you are perpetrating. Some people find it fascinating or frustrating that other people gossip. Some find it that they take credit of others. Some people find it that they steal food, body odor, all these elements. Because we are emotional beings, it's important for us to recognize that we are missing out on an opportunity. And we're missing out an opportunity for us to reflect on ourselves and to do better, to be better, to see better, and to actually inspire people to be better. And in any case, my ask for you is number one, be intentional. Anything that you do, be intentional. What is intention? It's that element that precedes any purposeful action. Before you do anything, ask yourself, what outcome do I want out of this? Some of the conflicts, some of the issues that you find yourself engulfed in, you don't know why you're in there. You don't know what you want to achieve, but you're in there. Once you're able to identify this, you then recognize that influence is the result of your purposeful action. When you're intentional, you become influential. And when you're influential and we are able to see that you're really intentional and influential, then you have an impact. If you're looking to have an impactful leadership style, be intentional. But you can't be intentional if you're feeling insecure because you don't know who you are. Instead of saying you didn't mean what you meant, let's start by meaning what we do, meaning what we say. And by so doing, EQ in action is about you knowing yourself because you clearly see what you feel and do. You choose yourself because you mean what you do, or you do what you mean to do. And last but not least, giving yourself because you do it for a reason. Our continent is in dire need of leaders. Leaders that have emotional intelligence. And if there's anything that I can ask of you today is to remember that whatever you have to do, you have to engage from a point of understanding that people are gregarious. They affect one another. And so if whatever you do from this Africa Day celebration going forward, when we celebrate Ubuntu and all our connectedness, even in the middle of a pandemic, we find ourselves needing to be stronger with each other than we were before. And so in our conversation, I believe that in this room are the right quality of leaders to take our conversation forward, to take our continent forward, because it starts by taking yourself forward. deciding not to be where you are right now because you want to see not only yourself, but the people around you moving forward. Start where you are with what you have and make a difference. Let's lead with emotional intelligence, understanding that we have got people around us who are coming from different circles. But with what we do, we're intentional, we are in line with our actions. Our continent is in a drought of leadership. Instead of raising your hand to criticize, I challenge you to raise your hand to serve. Over to you, Koketso. Koketso, are you on?
Thank you. Sorry, Andrew. Thank you so much for that insightful session. I'm actually going to ask Obril to manage the Q&A for you. Kuketsa was just experiencing a slight technical difficulty, so she should be back on soon.
Cool.
Thank you, Natasha. Thank you, Andrew. I think it was quite an engaging session, and thank you so much for that. Well, I'll dive into the first question that we do have here. It's from Nozipo. She asks, identity is playing a big role in our generation and one of the drivers of current trends. How does one identify an unhealthy identity?
How does one identify an unhealthy identity? It starts obviously with self-awareness, reflection. So my recommendation in many of the cases, and an unhealthy identity could be you have gone through a lot of challenges in your upbringing or in your growth. And so out of going through that, you always feel, instead of identifying yourself as a survivor, you identify yourself as an unlucky person. And so you want to turn around that and actually develop an optimistic outlook. But you can't do that on your own. There's a reason why we've got psychologists. There's a reason why we've got doctors. There's a reason why we've got nurses. There's a reason why we've got friends. They play a role. And part of that role is to help you see differently. I always say to people, have you ever imagined, or I'm sure you have, in fact, you have possibly tried to pick up a remote or a phone or something using your leg, right? And if you have, you would have noticed that, yeah, you could pick it up. It's not impossible. But it would have been much easier if you'd used your hand to pick that thing up. And sometimes in our lives, we're picking up our pieces using our legs and not our hands. And so for you to be able to change the scope is you need someone to tell you, no, don't try to do this on your own. Use other people. Sometimes our psychologists, our therapists are our hands or our hands, and we shouldn't be forcing our legs to do the work. I hope that answers the question.
I hope it does. Again, from Nozipo, she says, self-awareness is a very daunting task because it requires confronting self. How did you start practicing it from, or rather, how do you start practicing it from being kind to yourself?
Good. Great question. So self-awareness is not about discovering deep, dark, unconscious secrets or motivations. It's really not that. That's not what we are up for. Self-awareness is actually identifying the things that make you tick, the things that excite you, the things that really get your adrenaline going, the things that drive you. And so instead of trying to find out what's the cause of my frustration, my sadness, no. You're doing it the other way around. Start looking differently. Remember, you're trying to build an optimistic outlook. So what is it that drives me? What is it that brings serenity? What is it that brings joy? What is it that brings fulfillment? And when you start asking yourself that way, you start building the idea of self-awareness. And you're not ignoring the things that are frustrating you. We already identified our pet peeves. But focusing on our pet peeves will not help us. Focusing on what fulfills us will keep us busy enough not to focus on the small things that frustrate us. And I hope that answers the question again. Nozipo.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Another one is from Bonolo. Bonolo says, is there a book that you can recommend? I think I was also going to ask the same. Is there a book you can recommend on emotional intelligence for all of us to read?
Definitely. I would recommend you look for a book called Emotional Intelligence in Action, I think by Daniel Goleman. He is the expert in EQ, but I wouldn't simply let it be just one book. There are so many books, whether it's from leadership, from elements to do with relationships. I think there's one that I love very much by Dale Carnegie, which says how to win friends, how to win and influence friends. And that for me is a great reference that you can look into. But emotional intelligence is our daily life, simply us practicing getting to know each other and learning with working with each other. But those two books, any book by Daniel Goleman, and then maybe the How to Win and Influence Friends by Dale Carnegie are the two topmost books that I would recommend.
Awesome, awesome. We still have more time, and we do have another question from Nozipo. It says, "Is your legacy only consisted of if your legacy only consisted of 3 statements? What would you say to future generations under the theme of identity, service, and EQ?" If your legacy only consisted of 3 statements, what would you say to future generations under the theme of identity, service, and EQ?
Know yourself is around identity, know yourself. Again, I always come back and say, maybe a lot of times we don't recognize this, but some of our relationships are failing because we are insecure in those relationships. I am an avid follower, in fact, maybe a stalker of the Obamas, Barack and Michelle Obama. And one time I was listening to their interview and Michelle was confessing or appraising the idea that she goes to therapy. And the reason why she decided to do so was she recognized that Barack was not going to bring her the happiness that she wanted. She needed to bring her own happiness into a setting. And so I always believe that sometimes we are disqualifying ourselves because we don't know what we want. And that's why we're in conflict. So when it comes to identity, it'll be know yourself. When it comes to service, I would say serve others and you'll be served. If there's anything that I live by, it's if I help enough people achieve what they want to achieve, I too will achieve what I want. And I can promise you, it's been manifesting in my own personal and professional life. When I help other people, somehow I find people helping me and it makes me uncomfortable because then I'm like, I didn't help you to help me, but again, you recognize that it's not the same people that you help that help you, but you're creating a ripple, you're creating an ecosystem of that. And so you make it easy. And the last part, I think it was, you mentioned identity, service, and I think leadership, was it? Please confirm.
Thank you, Andrew. We also have a question from Loyiso Mali. I'm often approached by people who are emotionally depleted and somehow confiding in me helps them. At the same time, people complain about how firm I am when talking to them. How do I express compassion but still take the message across?
You can't control how people receive your message. What you can do is you can only influence how they receive it by the way you say it. Now, in my circles as well, Loyiso, you might find out from the people who know me very well, they almost call me as a person who calls a spade, but they still come to me for help. They still come to me for assistance, but they still like, when I come to you, I must prepare myself. I must prepare myself emotionally and physically. And the reasoning behind that is they appreciate your contribution. Difficult as it is, it's a bitter pill for them to swallow, but that pill is good for their health. And so they'll come to you. So my recommendation is that balance, you can only find it by you being true to yourself and being able to assist. For as long as you are looking within and seeing yourself giving feedback because you really care, that care will actually show even in your honest feedback to these people. You don't need to be hard-bent to get them to see it. You don't need to lie or twist the truth or to be, in any case, package it in any manner. You need to then be straightforward because you want to give people a straightforward, honest understanding because that contributes to what they are all about.
Andrew, if I can just add on that with a little bit of advice to Loiso, what I find to be an easier way is I always find the person's strengths and highlight that first. I compliment them before actually being critical or really brutal with a response. I find that if you first build them up and then once you've established that relationship, then you are able to give them a brutally honest answer or advice.
Beautiful. Love that. Agree. Agreed.
Brilliant. Awesome. Tato Veli says, character, could we be having such a drought of leaders here in our continent because of leaders who are preaching one in public but doing another in private in a hope that no one will know? What message would you give us as future leaders of this continent when it comes to character? That's a very good one.
That's a good one. I agree. Thank you, Tato, for that question. So my response to you is possibly as simple as follows. Do you know what your values are? If you're going to be a leader with no values is no different to a person without a backbone. They will fall for anything. A leader with no values is no different to a person without a backbone. If your value is being inconsistent, then you will practice as these leaders that you're talking about would say one thing and practice another. But if your value is integrity, your personal value is integrity, then you are guaranteed that what you do and what you say, they're in alignment. I hope that answers your question in as succinctly possible manner as possible.
Brill, if I might just comment with Andrew. Andrew,
I believe you've got the...
You absolutely reiterated what I said yesterday in one of the other sessions. Thank you. I value it so much because I was saying that your heart and your mind means it all has to be in leadership, meaning that your words and your actions have to align. So I really appreciate it when you said that now, and to also add on to Natasha, it's true. It takes courage to be a leader and to give the feedback, to give honesty, and also we must be approachable leaders, and we must always give the truth and be consistent. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you. I'd like to then close off this presentation from my side with a short video clip that I hope you can take on and run with it. And it's about you paying it forward.
May I have this? No. Why don't you get something special for Grandpa? I'm sorry. Can I return the cake, please?
Sure, yes.
I want the cake, please. I won't ask for anything else. Next time, okay? When we can afford it? Last time you said that.
You don't want that? I'll take it then.
There's no reason for you to buy the cake for us.
Well, when I was 7, my mother wanted to buy me a cake.
Mommy, I want this one.
By the counter, we didn't have enough.
Can we get something else?
It's my birthday today. Can I choose my own cake, please?
I'm sorry.
Then, there's this man. I've never met him before.
Here, have the cake. Happy birthday.
I didn't know his name. I never got a chance to say thank you. I've never forgotten about him. The man in the queue.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
Can I have your contact number? Let me repay you when we have the money.
Promise me something, okay? Someday, when you're able to help somebody, you will do it?
I chose this cake for your birthday.
Wow, this is my favorite. Thank you.
Let's go and put some candles.
Oh, careful. You shouldn't have spent the money.
Actually, I came and paid for it.
He give me this note.
Please write down your address. I'll bring the money back to you later.
A simple act of caring creates an endless ripple.
That comes back to you.
Thank you.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday.
Let's create ripples everywhere we go by our leadership. That concludes my assignment. It was a privilege to be a part of you today, and I look forward to you creating your own ripple of leadership in this continent. Over to you, Mr. Dutra.
Wow, I'm out of words, really. If I could play some audio of an applause, I would do that right now. If I could get everyone in the chat room to scream and say thank you. We're truly grateful for you joining us today. It means so much. And I think this is what we need as young individuals, as young adults, as young people, as young leaders. This is exactly the conversations that we need to have in order for us to build a better Africa, better communities. And on behalf of the Mafikeng chapter, I'd just like to say thank you so much to the Golden Key Southern African team for allowing us to use this platform as well. Thank you so much. We're not done with day 2. It's a packed program, and we wish we could keep you longer, Andrew, so that we can go on. I think you can tell from how all the audience was engaged and the questions that were coming through. We really would have loved to have you for longer. So Next up, we actually have a session on group dynamics and conflict resolution. I think this sets the tone, in how do we handle group dynamics as well. So thank you for your wonderful session on emotional intelligence. For all our panelists as well as the attendees, thank you again for engaging. Be sure to connect with Andrew. Go follow him on his LinkedIn, Instagram, find him there. And yeah, let's have conversations about leadership and developing our nations. Thank you so much again, and bye.
Goodbye, thank you.